everyone. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. So, if you're watching on YouTube, if you could please like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening on Spotify, you can always follow us there. Every like and share and subscribe can help our channel to be seen by many more Stargate fans. So, we really appreciate it. And then we also have all of our socials listed up on the screen right now if you wish to follow us there. Okay, thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Bye. And to all the Stargate fans out there, we would love to hear from you and chat with you on our show. So if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to us via any of our social media platforms or email.
I thought it would be really cool today to talk about some minor characters. And I know we actually prepared 3 to talk about. And I think we'll do a couple of these episodes where we talk about some characters that aren't part of the main cast or necessarily the consistently recurring cast. One that is a protagonist, one that's more of an antagonist, and maybe one that is even in a smaller role, like less than 5 episodes, but we feel deserves some attention. But before we get into that, I'm inviting anyone to contact us if you want to share your art, if you want to share any other fandom related things on our podcast. We love to see what other people do and how they engage with the community and with their love for Stargate. But first, maybe let's just start getting into these characters. So I've started preparing a list of some minor but recurring characters that have some kind of role in the story that might be interesting to talk about. And today we will start with maybe the protagonist. And for this episode, we've selected Maybourne. So I'll just maybe give a little bit of background and then we can start talking about it. Just a brief, like, he appeared in 11 episodes of Stargate, which I was really surprised about because I thought it was more. I believe the first appearance was in the episode with the Tolan, I think called Enigma, where he was somewhat of an almost like having this antagonist role because he was against the SG-1 decisions. But he kind of had like a very developmental arc throughout the series where he also worked with the main cast, especially O'Neill, and kind of became more of like a character that had good and bad aspects, but definitely wasn't necessarily antagonist. So yeah, maybe we can just open up with saying, what are our thoughts on Maybourne? What do we feel were kind of some important things he contributed to the story and overall?
Yeah. Did you want to go first?
It's up to you. I can go first or you can go first.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just
You go first.
Okay, I just babbled a lot, so I feel like I should give it over. But I mean, I can say, like, I really love the character of Maybourne because he's one of those characters that you can both simultaneously really like, but also really dislike. And I think they kind of explored a lot in the show, different kind of, similar characters to O'Neill that he could put himself against as in not necessarily an agreeing position, but not necessarily a disagreeing position. And I think one example of this would be Daniel Jackson. There was a lot of this like banter between O'Neill and Daniel Jackson, but they're on the same team. It's kind of a different dynamic because it's more, military versus, sort of empathetic, anthropological perspective that Daniel Jackson had. And whereas O'Neill was more pragmatic. But I think with Maybourne, it's very interesting because their backgrounds are so similar. And if I remember right, they're almost, I mean, at some point they're the same rank. So it's very, very close in terms of what they are, but they have such different perspectives, but yet there's still so many similarities because O'Neill was also known for bending the rules to do what he felt was right. And in the end, Maybourne is usually doing what he feels is right. So my appreciation of the character is kind of how it ended up being that Maybourne is this sort of like shadow of O'Neill, but in a different way, and that they had this kind of cool sort of relationship with each other. Yeah, which we can talk about some of the episodes where that was highlighted in some really interesting ways. But yeah, like those are just my initial feelings.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like I've always really loved Maybourne, especially as as you start to see more of his character, and his character starts to um I think like be in more of the episodes, or like it's specific episodes that, you know, he's in, where it's, you know, he's a main part of that storyline or whatever. Because I think if I remember correctly, initially he just kind of appeared here and there. He was kind of like the character that was just a jerk, right? And um you know, you could tell that him and O'Neill like didn't like each other, but there wasn't like too much really going on, I think, initially with his character, like, and then gradually like more developed with that. And I think like he really grew to be one of my favorite characters, I think, that aren't part of the main cast. And I love the, like you mentioned, the dynamics between him and O'Neill. Um, and I also just feel like just that actor, he's just so good with like expressing what's his name, Tom McBeath. He's so good with expressing his emotions in a way that it shows on and within his face and everything, and just how he portrays his character in a way that really does make you like love to hate him. It's kind of like, you know, you can actually feel sorry for him, or you feel like you're rooting for him at times. And then other times you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. Why was I rooting for him? Because then he's just going to go and stab them in the back. And it's kind of like you go through the emotions that probably O'Neill was going through, where like if O'Neill was like suddenly like trying to trust him on something, and then Maybourne does something to like prove that he's still being sneaky or whatever. And so like I just feel like I really like how his character progressed. And I was trying to find this little clip of a video, but I couldn't find it. I remember watching a different YouTube video where the actor himself was being interviewed, and I'm probably paraphrasing it all wrong, but basically like he was saying how with the character Maybourne, he, I think it was his decision to kind of like give more of like a human kind of nature to Maybourne, as opposed to just being a jerk all the time. Like I think he didn't initially like how that character didn't have much depth to it at first, and I think he had suggested something to them about that character, and then they kind of went with that, if I'm remembering it correctly. Because I do remember watching an interview. I think it was um oh, what's that YouTube channel that tends to have all the interviews? The guy's really good. Is it called like Gate World or
There's
something
a
like that? And he was talking with him on there. And it was something along the lines of his character, and how like basically he was wanting his character to develop more in a way that like people could also like relate to him. So I think he certainly did that.
yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
really interesting that, because actually you feel like when you watch it, I mean, the first appearance he has, you really just don't like the character, because
Yeah.
it's coming in as this opposition to SG-1. And I know in the first season they were kind of trying to portray this, that SG-1 is part of the military organization, but as they're going out, they're kind of learning other things. And by the time you get to the episode with the Tolan, where they have to help them escape, it's like they're starting to learn and become more aware. And I think, Maybourne is brought in as one of those, he's supposed to be against this kind of thinking, and he's supposed to be that kind of antagonist to this. And I think that when he's brought in later, it's similar, but I think, to me, when he starts developing, is like the episodes where I think O'Neill and Maybourne start to refer to themselves as Starsky and Hutch, and they sometimes have to help each other infiltrate. And I mean, also, I think bringing up, like, because Maybourne is part of this, sort of organization where they're trying to get the technology, and he's not doing it necessarily for a bad reason. I mean, he has like, and I think that had the show maybe like, it could have theoretically been a similar situation where the show was based on that faction, and they were trying to get the technology that the evil military was hoarding and keeping from them so that they could defend themselves. And I think if it was presented in that perspective, you might have like maybe those people wouldn't have been portrayed as antagonists in that sense. And so I think
that's a good point.
like it is a very gray area when you think that there are plenty of movies and shows out there where the civilians are the good ones that are saying that the military is keeping things from us, etc. So
Yeah.
I think in that sense, that's where it started to show that a little bit more of this, like, not just he's a bad guy. And but where I really like his development with O'Neill is one of the ones that's interesting, and I'm curious your thoughts. The episode Paradise Lost, where they're both
Yes.
stuck on that. I mean, I guess they're stuck on the moon, right? I can't remember the details, but they get stuck on a moon, and like the entire episode is basically kind of exploring their dynamic, and it's almost like I kind of want, like, it's like a fan service episode of people that are like liking this dynamic between Maybourne and O'Neill.
Is that the one? Is that the one where they try and kill each other?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. That definitely is one of my favorite ones too. Um, yeah, I think that too, like, I guess, like, uh, something that I guess kind of changes with the Maybourne character to also allow him to be more likable is that kind of like humorous side. So it's like they went from having him be very like straight laced, this is how he is. He's kind of like this like figure that Jack doesn't like, and he's doesn't have much going on personality wise. He's just kind of like this jerk that kind of always goes against what you're perceiving as the right thing to do, basically. And then it switches to where like you start to see more of his personality, and then especially with him and Jack, I feel like that there's that humor always there, um
Yes.
like between the two of them, that even when like crappy things are happening, it's like that's there. And I mean, I guess that's part of like what we've always mentioned that we love about Stargate, right? Is that they're always able to have like serious topics but then have the humor there, and it's like a good balance. And so I feel like with those two characters too, it's like a good balance of that as well. But yeah, I agree, that's one of my favorite ones. I was trying to think also, I think one that was amusing, but I can't remember what the name of the episode was, is the one where he makes those people think that he's like a god, and like someone's like feeding him grapes
Yeah.
and stuff, and like that's like he's so ridiculous there.
That's his last appearance, right? Like I think so. And I think this is
Did you
so
say that
brilliant.
was his last appearance? Sorry, you had cut out for a second.
It is his last appearance, right? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like it might be his last appearance.
I
Um,
think so. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I really, really like that because it does such a good job, like that where, you don't want to make it like he isn't like this heartwarming good guy. He's just not totally evil. And I love that, like, in a way, the end of his character was that, I mean, in the end, he's doing something, like he is helping these people, maybe for the wrong kind of selfish reasons, and he of course is being Maybourne about it. But I thought it was such a nice subtle grayness of his end. And then
Yeah.
yeah, you have that humor thrown at the beginning, like when they first meet, and like I think O'Neill was promoted to general, and he's like, ah, well, congratulations on making general, and he's like, you made king, or you know.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think I really like that they didn't ever, like, they developed the character in such a way that it was true to the character, but it kind of, and I love this about so many of the Stargate characters, that like they aren't necessarily perfectly good or perfectly bad. They're just human in a way, like, because that's what humans are like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree.
I think it's also important to cover some of the antagonists, especially because there's so many, like, I mean, of course, there's always like usually this like kind of main primary baddie or a couple main primary baddies. But I also think that there's like quite a lot of sort of sub baddies or baddies that appear in a kind of a recurring way or have a really impact on the story. And so we should talk about them as well. And um I mean, I should say, I forgot to mention in this episode, we're covering people from SG-1. So we'll do this from SG-1, but also Atlantis and eventually Universe when we get to it. But in this case, for this episode, I thought it would be cool to talk about Nirrti, who was one of the earliest brought in like Gou'ald that wasn't Apophis, because for the longest time Apophis was like their main rival. And I mean, she was kind of interesting. So I'll just quickly go over the fact she appeared in 13 episodes, which I was really surprised to find out that Nirrti appeared more than Maybourne.
Yeah.
So she's part of the Gou'ald, like the System Lords. And so I mean, I guess she appears whenever they have these System Lord meetings and when there's multiple Gou'ald. And I think there's quite a lot of that actually kind of in the mid, starting from like season 4 onwards. But she was first introduced during the Cassandra arc. So Cassandra is eventually Janet's daughter, but she was brought in because her people were wiped out from a plague, and I guess it was, if I remember right, it was caused by Nirrti, right? But then also Nirrti had implanted this device that when she went near a Stargate, it would go kaboom, and she and everything.
Yeah.
And Nirrti's kind of known for being, I mean, I guess like all the Gou'ald System Lords, they kind of have their personality and their certain things. And I think what's unique about Nirrti is she is always known for like this sort of human experiments of making the perfect host, and then also the stealth, because she kind of really developed like invisibility technology, if I'm correct. But I thought that was interesting because she's kind of always she's a very like slightly different from the other ones in that regard from the beginning, because she has her different way of trying to get power. So yeah, I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on Nirrti?
Yeah. So I guess I'll just also mention the actress's name that played her was Jacqueline Samuda. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but yeah, I mean, I guess I've always had mixed feelings. Like I think the characters played so well, and kind of like how evil the character is, in the sense
Yes.
that like she's so unlikable in that sense, because of, doing experiments that really, can cause mass murder and suffering and
Yes.
all these horrible things, that it's like I remember just like anytime I would like see her within an episode, I'd be like, oh no, it's her. And
Yeah.
but I mean, I guess like I, I think it's kind of like an interesting character in the sense that, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but isn't she like one of the only Goa'ulds that kind of is acting more like a scientist in a sense, and experimenting and all of that? Like I don't know if there's others that they mention that do that. Um a lot of times it's I don't know. I feel like they kind of treated her character a little bit differently in that sense,
Mhm.
where I feel like there's more depth to that character and more of like just kind of an interesting storyline, I guess, in that sense. I can't remember if they go much into like the host. Do they ever go into the host, like, and mention anything about the host?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that's an interesting thing you bring up, because I think the only host that they ever really um touched base with in that sense was Apophis's host. When Apophis was
Right.
king, and then his host came forth for a little while. And I don't think, other than Nirrti, seeking the perfect host, I don't think there was any real like discussion of who the host of Nirrti was.
And like I can't remember, does she have a reason, like, for all of her experiments? What was she ultimately aiming for in those experiments?
I mean, I think she felt that if she had the perfect host that could do all these things, then she would be. I mean, in the end, it's interesting because like all the system lords, they seem to be all after power, like between
Yeah.
each other. And like, I mean, it's very interesting because they're all kind of like that, and they have their egos. And I think what you brought up about the fact of how she pursues it is so different. I mean, that's what I also find very unique about Nirrti, because a lot of them, they build up their Jaffa army, and then they kind of go wipe out as many people as possible. And I think bringing her character in also kind of opened the door that Gou'ald could be a little bit more of deeper thinkers and a little bit more scheming. Obviously, we would not like be like, yeah, I love this character like so much because they were such a like nice person. But I think in terms of like creating a little bit more of a depth and not so one dimensionality to the Gou'ald, I think Nirrti was a really good one. And I think like this aspect of like making a superior host, like I think then it brought in a lot of more conversation about things in the direction of ascension and like those kind of things in the series that like they kind of touch on later, and I think they touch on that further in Atlantis. But yeah, I can't remember now what was the original question of if it talked about her host or why she was trying.
Yeah, just like I guess a few questions I had with her character in particular is one, do they mention the host? Because I was curious if the host was into science or anything like that. And then also what was the other question? Just like the reasoning behind her experiments. Like I couldn't remember like what the ultimate goal was for that, as to why like if she felt the need to do that. Because I think what's also so like adds to the fact of again like loving the character but hating her at the same time is the fact of like how she does things that are so cruel. And so it's like, you know, experimenting on children and implanting that thing in Cassie, right, that she could have just blown up, right? And so like it's just kind of like unthinkable things. Like I think whenever you bring into like a storyline that someone's willing to like do those things to children, I think it adds like a extra level of like, oh my gosh, this person's a monster. Like, because I think sometimes you can get numb to the fact of like when you're watching characters that so easily kill, you know, other characters, you can kind of get numb to that if that's like always happening. And so I think her character kind of reminds everyone how bad the Gou'ald are and what they're truly capable of, because since there is that level of humor that is put throughout the show, sometimes I think you forget, and then you're confronted with it, with serious things that they do, like in her case.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. Because I mean, of course, like it doesn't make anybody look good that they're, you know, but when you watch Jaffa killing other Jaffa, I think the impact, of course, like it's so different from like manipulating an innocent child. And I think like well, manipulating in the sense of the DNA and the body. And I think like that's the later on, I mean, where it kind of really I think it's the last episode with Nirrti where she's making experiments on the people of that planet. And I mean, it's such a really interesting situation because they end up, I think, for quite most of the episode, believing that she is actually helping them because I mean, in a way, they are getting more powers, which is, I actually think that's so important because in real life, that's exactly how it happens. I mean, I think that's kind of right on the money that a lot of times when people are ending up following in a situation like that, they really do believe that they're getting some benefit from this. And I think that was just done in such a, you know, because the way the episode begins, I mean, the person is like, right, somebody comes from the planet and they immediately die and say like, she's messing with everybody in my village. But then you get there and all the people really believe in her. And I think that being able to show that is just so interesting. And then it just shows you the depths of like where that character will go. Because I mean, of course, all the Gou'ald, they kind of have this sort of attitude of everybody is dispendable. But as you said, because there's humor, because they appear to be human, because they have this ridiculous costumes, because there's always banter, it is quite easy to forget like exactly what they are. And then you see in that point, everything is disposable. Like they're all these people,
Yeah.
she doesn't care, they're just a thing on the ladder of getting, being the best Gou'ald, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And I was trying to remember part of like her appearance, like some of her episodes, like it in what is she? I remember her, I think you wrote it somewhere. I can't find it right now, but maybe you'll remember, is didn't she specifically do something to Jonas?
Yes, she did. Like I think it was in that episode, like she manipulated his DNA in that DNA manipulator machine. And I'm not sure, like I feel like she repaired something, but remember then later didn't like he develop a tumor that they ascertained was like from, and somebody can correct me if I'm totally wrong because it was a while that I saw this. But like then he
Yeah.
was seeing the future, and I feel like it had something to do with the manipulation that she did.
I think so. I think you're right. I do remember something happening after the fact. Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like there's, yeah, I guess now thinking about like all of the different things that she's done, like I guess maybe 13 episodes does make sense, but I was initially surprised to see that she was in more episodes than Maybourne, because I feel like, I mean, maybe part of it is like you were saying, like sometimes she was just like in little bits and pieces, and then sometimes it'd be more like full episodes, whereas with Maybourne, maybe it just felt like it was more because of there being like full on episodes that were involving his character and stuff. So
Totally, totally. And I mean, I think there was a lot of, because Nirrti appeared in a lot of the like Gou'ald Summit episodes, and I think there was one where they were like in SG-1 trying to make an alliance, and actually it was Nirrti that caused a problem because remember she was like invisible, and then they
yes.
did something, but really it was Nirrti. And so I mean that's where I think you can just see like Nirrti is just so um it's like I found it such an interesting take on a Gou'ald because it's just so like conniving in a very different way, like
Yeah.
a mentally manipulative like way. Because
Yeah.
in the situation, the whole point of it was to get everybody thinking something. And that's not, I mean, usually, like, I mean, when we first meet Apophis, he's just like, I'm a god, you're all dead, like, ultimate power, right? Like, they don't usually try and triangulate people. And I think that's Nirrti was operating in very, like, a different way from most Gou'ald, where she was kind of like
Yeah.
triangulating and manipulating the situation. And so I thought that was kind of like a little bit different in that regard. And maybe that kind of
Yeah.
opens the door for Goulds that, like Ball, that have different kind of personalities, which um, later on. And I think later on the Gould, you do start to see more different kinds of personalities emerge. But I mean, very, very
Yeah.
kind of like you get Apophis standing there with his, ridiculous costume, like that's all flashy, and like his attitude, like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And it just it makes me really like wish, like I know, like I think we said this in our last episode or whatever, but how it'd be really cool to have, like we said this in one of our episodes anyways, how it'd be really cool to have like little like short like mini series things of like side characters and stuff that would kind of go in, or any character, but like go into like their background and stuff, because I think Nirrti would be like a fascinating one to like have it be like where initially it starts off where it's like the host and you get to learn about the host, and then it goes into how she became the Goa'uld, and I think she could be a really fascinating one to like hear a backstory and how she came to be the way she is, because there's could be so many different reasons as to why she operates in the way she does, especially like because you said she operates quite differently, noticeably differently from the other
yeah.
Goa'uld. So there must be a reason for that, and so I think that would be a really like interesting um like little mini series or something to do. That'd be so cool.
Well, I mean, and you bring up a really interesting point there because you mentioned was the host scientific, and the Goa'uld themselves are always saying, "Oh, well, nothing of the host survives," and they don't have this exchange. But if you look at the Tok'ra, they're always talking about, "Oh, well, my host is, into this," and sometimes they take things from each other, and sometimes they, like they like how I think was it Anise and Freya where one says I prefer, like my host prefers writing in a notebook or something, so that's why I do that or whatever. And so sometimes they kind of conjoin and they take things from the other.
Yeah.
But like Selmak, for example, like Jacob said, he gave up coffee because Selmak didn't like it, and so it kind of makes me wonder, well,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing of the host, quote unquote, survives according to the Gou'ald, but you raise a fair question. Was the host scientific? Is that part of the reason why maybe Nirrti is like this? Is there some influence?
Yeah.
It's a very
Yeah. And can you imagine like being that host and being aware that your your scientific knowledge is now being used to like mass murder and for like horrible reasons and stuff, and cause so much suffering. Like that'd be like so torturous. Like, because you think of what the poor host goes through, being taken over like that. Um, so yeah, like I just feel like it could be taken in so many like different ways with that character to like learn and understand more about her. It could be really cool. I think she's one of the ones that I think would be like a really good choice for like a mini series if they did have one, because like it just seems like there could be so much with that story. So yeah,
hint,
that would be
hint,
awesome.
hint, producers, hint, hint, hint.
Yes. And then hire us as composers.
Yeah, exactly. Nirrti's like fake TikTok channel or something. Like
Yeah.
that'd be so amazing. Like you're posting reels every day. Get ready with me.
That'd be funny.
Um, but yeah, so we discuss a protagonist, we discuss an antagonist, and the one thing I think would be really good to bring up, and because I know there's so many recurring characters that are there for like 10 episodes or 11, and they're kind of they are considered kind of part of it. But I think we should also talk about characters that appeared in 5 or less episodes. And in this one, I've written down Orlin, who technically appeared in 4 episodes, but I think he was mentioned a couple of other times. But it's a really interesting character that actually did have some impact on the story, even though he had very, very little screen time and had kind of a unique arc. And so maybe we can talk about that. I'll just give a little quick. He first appeared in the episode, I think it was in season 5, Ascension. It must have been because it was the season where Daniel left after the end, and that was season 5.
Oh,
And
okay.
so he first appeared in that episode of Ascension, because of course he's an ascended being and he kind of took corporeal form so that he could interact with Sam. But then he later appeared as having retaken human form after ascending again but with the form of a child. In I think season 9, I think that it's a 2-parter called The Four Horsemen, if I remember right. And it's the one where they're developing the cure for the prior plague, so he kind of has this sort of very spaced out small arc.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, maybe I'll just continue, like I can give my quick thoughts and then you can respond.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I actually really, really like the character of Orlin, because I mean, one, I think it was a really interesting way to introduce Ascension, in a way that also allowed for the door being opened for Daniel at the end of the season to ascend and then come back. And I think that's probably what they wanted to do. I don't know if that's intention with this episode, but that clearly opened the door for that. Because now you have this ascended being that can retake corporeal form. I mean, it's interesting because I'm sure a lot of people don't like the episode because like Carter's with this ascended guy, but I actually thought it was like, I kind of like sometimes these episodes that are like, I don't know, they're like not filler, but they're like kind of outside of this, but it's really not outside of the story because this is so important. And I actually really liked it, and I really like the character. I mean, of course, the character was a little creepy from human standards, but we have to understand he's been like alone and ascended for 10,000 years, so maybe he just doesn't quite have a grasp on human social conventions.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciate about that is that, I mean, you just have this short little arc that happens in one episode, but because of what happened in that one episode, it made when he returned later on just so heartbreaking because he came back as basically a little boy, and which is very weird because like poor Carter kind of had a somewhat of a relationship with him for a little while. And then he comes back. I mean, can you imagine like Like, just imagine, like, you date someone and then you meet them again and they've aged backwards 30 years. I mean, that would be very weird.
Yeah.
And especially because his knowledge and his personality and everything was the same. He just looked different. And in this sense, like, he was also working to develop this cure, so he actually really had a huge impact then on the storyline. So this is twice now that he came in for like very small, I mean, basically a large role within the context of the episode, but small overall in the series. But both times it had a huge impact, because then it also, because of this, they were able to finish developing something that helped them to, with the, I mean, I don't think he ever finished it, right? Like, he never finished the cure, but his knowledge helped them greatly. And his ending was pretty tragic. We can maybe get into that, but maybe just share your initial thoughts of the Orlin character.
Yeah, I think Orlin is a very memorable character. I think it's like for me, like, you know, I always joke that like my memory of things that happen within the show when I watch it, like I enjoy it in the moment, but then if you were to ask me stuff about it afterwards, sometimes I forget main things that you would wonder, like, well, you know, you're a fan, you've watched it a bunch of times, like why don't you remember it? But like that's just how I am. Like I'm kind of like in it in the moment, and like then some of it just leaves me, unless, but with his character, I maybe wouldn't always remember that his name was Orlin, but like but his character, it's like it's stuck with me. And so I think what you were saying was that was he the first mention of ascended beings? Was that like the first time that was mentioned? Do you know?
I'm not sure, because I know Oma was in season 3 with the episode where
Oh, okay.
Daniel went to Keb, but I'm not like, I really, it's kind of blurry in my head. I'm not sure that it was actually mentioned then what that was, like the whole concept of it.
Yeah,
I
like what it was. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that you could necessarily, like, that there was this idea that there was this recorporeal form, like, I mean, they're not supposed to take, but I mean, I think some of the intricacies of the ascended beings and the existence of a group of ascended beings that are kind of out there was more highlighted due to this episode, like, and
Yeah.
things that are allowed and not allowed and everything. So
Yeah. I mean, I like the character. Like I had this, like I kind of like how he's just kind of creepy. Like I kind of like that, like the whole thing's just so weird and so creepy, because it would be, right? Like, and I like that they chose it to be that it's someone that, like, an ascended being that took a form and followed Sam, because it's like, to me, like, you know, like him just showing up in her house and just kind of like standing there and being kind of creepy, like I find that like hilarious. And I think like um the dynamic between the of them as well, like, I mean, it's kind of oddly relatable, I think, in life, to like meet that one weird person that you don't quite know how to react. um but like I think, you know, because they could have taken like an ascended being and had it be like some like gorgeous model female that follows like Daniel Jackson to his home or something, you know, and they didn't choose to do that. They had, you know, and so, like, yeah, I mean, so I guess initially, like, my very, very first impression with his very first episode that I'd seen him in, I thought, like, I don't know how to feel. I feel a bit creeped out. Like, but then, like, you grow to kind of like him, because, like, it's like the way he interacts with her, sometimes it's like you said, like he's been alone for a very, very long time, so his way of interacting with her is kind of strange. And so to me, he kind of like has this sad puppy look all the time. Like if I see images of his character, he's like this sad looking puppy, yet very incredibly smart. I mean, it the the strangeness, like, expands once it kind of gets to the point where like Sam's kind of involved with him in a weird way, and that kind of,
yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. Like that kind of really weirds me out. Like, and then like you says, then once like he comes back into the like later episodes and is a child, then that's even like worse, right? Like, so it's like that character, when I like think of it initially, my very initial like reaction is I feel uncomfortable and everything feels weird.
How do you feel when you think about Orlin? I feel uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable and everything feels weird. I didn't think about that statement you just I get uncomfortable and everything feels weird. But like,
Oh god.
so you would say like on the realm of Sam and her relationships, pretending, let's just pretend we only met Orlin in season 5. We forget about season 9 Orlin that gets the whole other level. Are you an Orlin and Sam shipper, or are you not really for this relationship as much?
Not really, because I feel like he just seems so creepy that I feel like he's like in the sense that like he seems innocent in a sense that you want to like him and you want to kind of like that idea, but then he also seems like the kind of person that would be maybe like secretly like taking clippings of her hair and like sniffing the hair, having this little like odd collection at home somewhere like
Maybe he'd be too much. Like you're with him and like for the first like week it's okay, but then you're like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. Like this is too
yeah,
much. He writes you like
yeah.
30-page love letters every day and like poems, and then he reads it to you and you're like, like that, right?
Yeah, and then every time you get home he's just like standing there staring.
I prepared dinner.
And while initially it might seem nice, it gets to be too much. Yes.
But it was cute when like you know, Jack and Daniel and Teal came by with like pizza and movies or whatever, or was it, I can't remember if it was all 3 of them or just 1 or 2 or something, but they came by and then they're like, wait,
I
is
think it was Teal'c and Daniel, wasn't
and
it? I think
they're
Teal'c and
like,
Daniel.
wait, is somebody here? Yes. Yeah. And
I feel like, sorry, go ahead.
does she take the pizzas? I can't remember. Or
Oh,
does
she may have. I think she does take the pizza because then I think Teal'c looks really like saddened by that. Like, and if that didn't happen, then we must have imagined that. I'm pretty sure that happened. I'm pretty sure she takes the pizza. But like, I feel like those types of moments, like where like someone's there and then people come to like randomly visit, I feel like that only happens in TV shows and movies. Like, that doesn't actually happen in real life.
I mean, it happened to me when I was living in Eugene for a while, like until
Oh,
people
did it?
didn't live anymore. There was some people that would randomly come by. But I mean, where where was I that that was happening a lot actually, where people kept coming by? Because I remember thinking, oh wow, people keep really coming by. It was probably
But I
some,
mean, like, kind of like that whole scenario where, like, someone that's like single, like, has a date with someone, they have them over, like, then like someone randomly shows up, and then like they're like, "Oh, you have someone over," like that kind of scenario. I feel like always kind of happens in like TV shows and movies, or at least it did back at that time, probably
oh
because
yeah.
that time frame was different. Maybe that did happen to people in real life. I don't know, but like,
I bet you the difference is now you'd like text people and be like, I'm on a date. Like back then you probably, I mean, you would only call and then they would pop
yeah,
by. Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
But yeah,
true.
I've luckily like I've never, that scenario has never happened to me or in either direction, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But let's be real, my dating life at that time was not so happening.
Oh gosh.
Um, but yeah, I mean, so Orlin had this kind of, that was his introduction. He was really introduced as like this love interest of Carter. I mean, but also this bridge to Ascension. So it was really, and then of course you get like the Ascension theme music and that, which is just like the saddest theme music ever. Um, but then, I mean, what's tragic about Orlin, and that you don't know that his story is going to be tragic, is that he comes back in season 9 as a child, um, which it's a little, probably, I'm sure, weird for Carter. I mean, that must be also very heartbreaking. Oh my God. And then he comes back as a child, and he basically took that form so that he can help them with a cure for the prior plague. And because he took that form, his brain can't handle it, and his brain basically starts dying. Right? I mean, this is like
Yeah.
one of the most tragic endings I've ever seen of a character, because he ends up like completely out of it, and in like a home where he's just trying to do puzzles and probably has no memory of what he is. He can't ascend again.
Yeah. No, it's really, really sad. Like it's like it starts off, that episode starts off as kind of like humorous in the sense that like I don't know if they believed him initially that he was Orlin, right?
Yes.
And they just see this kid and they think like, what the heck? And he's kind of like oddly kind of like, acting still the same way that he would had he been in his adult form towards Sam. And so she's like really like thinking this is like funny, like, it's like, he's like hitting on her kind of thing. But like, so it's kind of starts off like that I think, I'm trying to remember how I felt when I was initially watching it. I don't think I expected it to fully take such a dark turn by the very end. Like, because a lot of times, you're rooting for it to all work out kind of thing. And while there was elements of that like he was able to help with, right, that it kind of did work out. Like for that character is so like devastating and so sad. And it's
Yeah.
like if you really put your mind there of what happens to him, it's terrible, and
Yep.
so yeah, yeah.
I mean, well, I think
But
the worst thing is like you assume as soon as they say he's gonna die, oh, he's just gonna ascend again. Like, but
yeah,
it's, no, his fate, it's terrible. Like, it's really,
yeah,
and I feel so
that's so
badly.
true.
I feel so badly. Like, it's one of the most tragic character ends in the series, actually, when I think about it.
Yeah,
That poor.
yeah. And I think that's probably why like that character, I think, stays so much in my mind is because of like the creepy factor, like the uncomfortable factor, and then just like the tragic stuff that happens later on, like because I think that's the only character within SG-1 where it's like, because whenever they've had like other things where like for example the clone of Jack, like, that was kind of still kind of like a funny thing, it didn't end up
Mhm.
tragic or anything like that. Like
Yeah,
there was
exactly.
elements of it that were humorous. So I think when they involve like children and make tragic things happen, it makes it just that so much more like impactful and that so much worse, and like it really sticks in your mind because like unfortunately when you watch shows where you're used to like awful things happening, and it's always happening to adults, it's like it feels, it's not that it's not awful, but it feels less awful, you know. And so like, yeah, I mean, how much, so he was only in like the character itself, not the actors, which I guess I should mention the actors' names too. So like the one that played the adult version was Sean Patrick Flanery, and Cameron Bright was the child version. Um, uh, but what was I going to say? I forget what I was going to say, but I was going to ask you something with that, but now I don't remember. Left in my mind. It will come
Oh, you
back
said
to me.
I think you were asking how many episodes he appeared in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Do you know how many episodes again? You said it was just like four.
I thought it was four. Let me double check. Because there were some where the character, maybe it's actually even less. Maybe it's only those three, but I don't know. Maybe okay. So if I look, it says character appearances. Okay, no, it is only three, because in The Fifth Man and Flesh and Blood, he's only mentioned. So he appears in
Oh, okay.
Ascension and The Fourth Horseman. So there's only three episode appearances, and really it's two, because the second one is the two-parter.
Wow. Okay. I mean, that one again feels like it's more episodes. I mean, like I knew like it wasn't many, but like, um, yeah. Definitely like all three that we mentioned, I think, they're so like impactful into like the storylines. I guess you could probably say that with any characters that they write in, but it's like they do stand out in your mind for, the reasons we mentioned and stuff.
Well,
Um
what's really interesting is to when you actually start talking about it and you realize how impactful they were on like certain levels, that you
yeah.
realize it's more impactful than you even realize at the time.
Yeah.
Because like you wouldn't really think, like, I mean, I think honestly, like the first time when I watched like this episode with Orlin, I just think, oh, it's another love interest for Sam and it's cute because it's Ascension and everything. And then you realize, oh, this is actually opening the door for what's happening with Daniel later on.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's so like well put together, like for things that happen later on.
Oh, 100%, 100%. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to hear from other people their thoughts on this three characters. Um, I mean, there are three characters, like, so it'd be interesting to also ask, like, which character of these three would you want to be stranded on a desert island with? Although I feel like that's kind of not fair because who would pick Nirrti, right? We have to come up
Yeah.
with a name for like the next time that people have to pick. That's actually difficult to choose since one will always be an antagonist.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure a
Yeah.
lot of people would, like, for example, Ball, a lot of people would pick Ball for various reasons. Like, most importantly, he's like pretty like smart and could probably figure out how to get you off the island.
Hmm. Oh gosh. So if you had to pick out of these three for what is it, being stranded on a desert island with, who would you choose?
Well, I know what it's like to be stranded on an island with Maybourne. I would pick Orlin, like the old Orlin, not the young Orlin, like the old Orlin that can ascend and reascend and take corporeal form and help me get out of the island.
Oh my gosh, you are very right with the Maybourne thing. I wasn't thinking.
Well,
That's really
I
funny.
didn't think about it. Like, now it's funny that I even brought up that question because I totally didn't think about that. Of the three characters that I mentioned, one actually was stranded on a desert, like a desert island with somebody.
Yeah, because at first I was thinking, oh, Maybourne, like what, like maybe that wouldn't be so bad. But like, yeah, I feel like you almost have to pick Orlin
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, it's probably like the best chance of like survival too, just because of like him being an ascended being. Um, but like, yeah, at first my mind was thinking, oh, Maybourne, like Maybourne might be a good choice, but then, yeah, clearly not.
But Maybourne is a little bit conniving, and he will probably do whatever he needs to do to save himself.
Yeah,
Nirrti will just be awful, and it like
yeah,
there's not even any conscience there. At least Maybourne would probably have a conscience, but he would be like, ah, well, I need to write it off to save myself. Whereas Nirrti will be like, I don't care. I'll experiment on you on this island for days. But I think the worst you're gonna get from Orlin is he's gonna stare funny at you. Like, this is the worst you're gonna get. He might come on too thick, like, but like he's just gonna stare. And then maybe like, I don't know, build a boat for you. But like he could build a Stargate out of like a toaster or something. So I mean,
yeah,
he'll
yeah.
build
He
a
probably,
boat and get you out of the
yeah,
boat
exactly.
after he looks creepily at you and tells you how he watched you when you were sleeping.
I was thinking how weird that would be, like if someone just heard that out of context, just hearing like, yeah, Orlin, he would just stare at you and then he'd build a boat for you.